This video will have major spoilers, so close out now if you have not yet seen the Netflix original movie called The Discovery. This movie is the type where you learn something new towards the end that changes the way you see the entire movie, and if you rewatch it a second or a third time, you might see some new rabbit holes to go down, or you might just see things differently. I've watched it 3 times in full, and a handful of clips a handful of times. Here's my take on it as of April 3rd, 2017. The title of the movie is The Discovery, but there are actually 3 big discoveries. Number 1, consciousness resides in the brain, not the stomach or the heart. When you die, your consciousness moves on to an alternate plane of existence. Number 2, they found out where the consciousness moves on to. If you have a big regret, you will get a second chance in a very similar plane of existence, a chance to change things or change yourself. And once you accomplish that, number 3, you can move on to another plane of existence. When you respawn somewhere, you won't have a solid memory of those other lives you lived, but some things will stick out, and you may chalk them up as dreams, deja vu moments, or random coincidences, but they are more than that. They are subtle hints at the multiple planes of existence. Now let's review these 3 discoveries in more detail. Thomas says,
"We're programmed to process our experiences as having a beginning and an end when in reality it doesn't exist."
So keep this in the back of your mind. I will return to this at the end of the video. Technically, there is no beginning, but I am going to lay out the main timeline we saw chronologically, so to say. We start in a plane of existence that I am going to call Reality 1. Years before the start of the movie, William, a neurosurgeon, wrote some scientific papers on consciousness being a state of matter. It inspired his father, Thomas, to do research, which he pursued relentlessly at the expense of his marriage. Thomas's wife asked him to join her for their anniversary dinner, and he said he was busy doing work, so she went upstairs and drowned herself in the bathtub. Because of this, William stops working on the research with his father. Eventually, Thomas comes across the first discovery. He found out that brainwaves move on to somewhere else after you die. People start committing suicide for various reasons. Some may have been sick or in pain, and knowing that death wasn't the end, they killed themselves to escape that pain and move on to whatever was next. Some may have missed loved ones and killed themselves in hopes of reuniting with them. But here's the thing, at this point in time, just 6 months after the discovery, Thomas Harper doesn't know where the brainwaves travel to. He just has evidence of them going somewhere. In the interview, he says that he does not feel responsible for the suicides, but he does, and this is why Thomas is doing the interview. On principle, he can't deny the truth. There are other planes of existence, but he hopes that if he educates people, they will stop assuming that the afterlife is good. They will stop committing suicide. Unfortunately, my dude commits suicide on air, and suicide rates climb over the next year and a half, from 1 million to over 4 million suicides. After the on-air interview, Thomas moves off-grid and doesn't do any further interviews. Thomas would have people believe that he is continuing his research in honor of all those that committed suicide, but let's be real. As Toby said to Will, Thomas has been continuing his research mainly to find out where their mother went after she died. On the 2nd year anniversary, William returns with the intention of telling his father, Thomas, to tell the world that he was wrong, that brainwaves do not move on to anywhere else. It would be a lie, but he feels like it would be the right thing to do. He meets Isla on the ferry, but then decides not to go to his father. Keep in mind, this happens off camera. We find out about this in the final scene. Instead of following the path that we see him on for most of the movie, he instead returned to the routines of his life in Reality 1. But then he found out that Isla drowned herself, and he committed suicide as well. That's where Act 2 picks up. Let's call it Reality 2. This is Will after he has committed suicide. He only realizes this at a subconscious level, but he is here to save Isla from drowning herself. That is the regret that he wants to change. So this time, he gets off the ferry, and he lives this loop many times because he is unable to save her. And I am not referring to the drowning. That may have been his initial regret, but he saved her from something bigger. Let's take a step back and check out her backstory. In the past iterations, she was pretty jaded. She lived life this way because of regret. She had fallen asleep at the beach and her 5-year-old son drowned. But when we saw William and Isla cuddling on the beach, Isla admits to Will, and more importantly to herself, that she has feelings for him. This is symbolic of her changing. She doesn't miss her son any less, and she doesn't feel any less guilt, but she has forgiven herself, and she is ready to move on, to embrace this current life, and when she dies, to move on to another life, instead of redoing this loop over and over because of regret. But she doesn't die for a while, so let's continue recapping what happens in Reality number 2. Will saved her from drowning. She takes the questionnaire and becomes a visitor to the compound. They both help Thomas continue his research. The next step is to determine where the brainwaves go. so they get a body from the morgue and run an experiment. They don't see anything, but Will runs a test on his own and finds something that he thinks is just a memory. But Isla noticed that the tattoos on Peter's arm were different. After investigating further, they realize that the machine actually works. It records video of the new plane of existence, and it reveals to them the second discovery, that you get to relive a similar life and make different choices. For Peter, this meant choosing to see his dying father instead of leaving the hospital. Before Will and Isla tell Thomas that the machine does work, he plugs himself in to try it himself. When he does this, he gets a glimpse into an alternate plane of existence where he can alter his own choices, where he puts aside his work to enjoy an anniversary dinner with his wife, and in theory, she wouldn't commit suicide. However, he never actually enters this reality in full. It is a fantasy overlaying reality 2, because Thomas is still alive in reality 2. They pull him out just before he dies, and this is further proof of discovery number 2. They realize that when you die, your brainwaves move to an alternate reality where you get a second chance to fix your biggest regret. This is great news, right? Or is it? The implication is cool, but they realize that if the world finds out, suicide will become an even bigger pandemic than it already is, so they decide to destroy the machine and keep it a secret. As soon as they make that choice, Cooper tells Thomas that everyone is outside asking for answers. Thomas starts giving them a speech about getting lost in other things instead of focusing on family, and out of nowhere, Lacey has returned and shoots Isla. She intentionally shot her in the stomach in order to preserve her brain. She doesn't want to kill Isla, she just wanted her spot back, so she relocated Isla. Keep in mind, we are in reality 2 right now. In this reality, Isla has finally changed. She's been saved, so to say, so she is ready to move on when she dies. Instead of respawning in the same loop, Isla respawns at the beach, before her son drowned. Let's call this reality 3. We'll get back to this, but let's keep looking at reality 2 for now. Will loves her, so he sets himself up to replay the events and prevent her from being shot. In his mind, he needs to do this to save her, but he is mistaken. Will plugs himself into the new machine and enters a fantasy on the ferry. This is an Isla doppelganger. It's not really her. It's just a memory of her, and it speaks to him. It tells him that she won't be here. She has moved on. He wonders if he will remember her if he also moves on, and tells himself that he will. Then we hear him flatline, and he moves on to reality 3 as well. He finds himself on a beach and saves a 5-year-old boy, Isla's son, Oliver. When you think of the name Oliver, what do you think of? Personally, I think of Charles Dickens' character, Oliver Twist, and there are a couple more twists that we can explore here. First, Will had mentioned a time earlier in his life when he was on the beach. He was 5 years old, and he flatlined. We don't get details as to what happened, but it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that he almost drowned to death. When he was resuscitated, he told his parents that he had had a dream where he saw a boy, maybe himself or his brother, a boy. We don't get details on this dream, but we can speculate that he saw the boy drowning. This is interesting in 2 ways. First, let's pretend that he foresaw Oliver drowning. Will is about the same age as Isla, so when Will was 5 years old, Oliver had not been born yet. This ties into the line where Thomas says that there is no beginning or end, just one long drawn-out middle. Here's another line supporting this.
Do you accept the fact that time is a nonlinear illusion created by man?
Will's consciousness is tied to all these various planes of existence, if only on a subconscious level. So basically, he knows where and when to find Isla and Oliver, to save Oliver, and in a sense, to save Isla in this plane, and he does just that. Second, Will said that he flatlined on the beach when he was 5 years old. If you haven't already, now is the time to put on your tinfoil hats. Oliver drowned when he was 5 years old. In some alternate plane of existence, Will might actually be Oliver. In some planes, Oliver drowns. In others, Will flatlined and then he survived. And in plane 3, Will is the man that saves Oliver. This sounds crazy, but this theory ties in to part of the conversation that they had on the ferry ride in when Isla looked at Will and tried to see if he looked like his name or not. Now let's take a step back and stop focusing on just Will and Isla. They are part of a bigger picture, a reality where everyone is like a cell in a big wave. Toby told Will that most people in the compound have tried to commit suicide 2 or 3 times. That may be true in this plane of existence, but in past iterations, I'm sure they did commit suicide. So everyone else we see in this movie, they are also going through loops, and Thomas has created a system to try to help them break those loops, to discover their regret, conquer it, and change it. When people arrive, he has them take a questionnaire to determine which level of clearance they are, how close they are to moving past their individual hurdle. Thomas has them sit down and meditate, to try to hear their subconsciousness in hopes of them finding subtle clues the same way Will did. Even Thomas himself has been in multiple planes of existence. If you rewatch the first scene, the interview, it ends with the buzzing sound, which suggests that Thomas's subconsciousness is reaching out.
Oh God. Turn those cameras off.
He has been in this situation before. Okay, we are almost done. We have gone through 3 major discoveries and a bunch of minor discoveries that helped the characters make those 3 big ones. But you could make the argument that the title of the movie relates to the very last couple seconds, when Will seemingly has a realization of the bigger picture. He realizes that he knows Isla, and he knows the story of Oliver. Will's actions resemble what some religions might refer to as an angel, and the coolest part about it is that Will isn't special. In this fictional world, everyone has the ability to reach into their subconsciousness and find information that can help them or help others. You and I might not have that same ability to look into our subconsciousness and find answers and clues, but we definitely have the ability to do the latter, to help others. And while we're at it, we should also remember Thomas's final discovery in reality too, that it's a mistake not to prioritize time spent with friends and family. So that's all I got for this one. I really like this movie, so thank you to Charlie McDowell and everyone who put this together. If you guys liked it, let me know in the comments section and let's chat about the various discoveries, twists, and theories. Let me know what you think I'm off on and what other rabbit holes I may have missed. I'm going to be doing another Game of Thrones video next, but later in the week I'll put together a Things You Missed and Easter Eggs video for the Discovery. I'll throw a link up to that once it's done, but that's it for now. This is Kev, I'll talk to you soon.